The mining vessel's steady horizon drifted through the darkness of space. It was a small ship, old and slow, carrying rocks and minerals from the outer rim back to space. Captain stood on the bridge and watched the stars through the main window. She had made this journey many times before. It was quiet work, safe work, and that was exactly what her people needed. They were not warriors. They were small beings with soft gray skin and 4 thin arms. Their large eyes could see well in darkness, which made them good at working in caves and mines. But their bodies were weak. Their bones broke easily. They could not fight and they could not run fast. In a galaxy full of predators, they survived by staying hidden and staying quiet. Was old now. Her gray skin had turned pale with age and her movements were slow. She had spent 60 years flying these trade routes and she had learned one important rule: avoid trouble. If you saw a warship, you changed course. If you heard of conflict in a system, you went around it. The galaxy was dangerous for the weak, and they were very weak indeed. Sat at the communications station. She was young, barely an adult by standards, with bright, curious eyes and quick hands. She was always asking questions about the galaxy, about other species, about places had visited. The captain liked her spirit, but she worried about it too. Curiosity could get you killed out here. The ship had 12 crew members in total. They were miners and engineers, simple workers just trying to earn enough to feed their families back home. None of them had ever held a weapon. None of them had ever been in a fight. The alarm changed everything. It came suddenly, a sharp screaming sound that filled the bridge. Red lights flashed on every console. Hands moved fast across her station, and her eyes went wide with fear. "Captain," she said, her voice shaking. "Ships, many ships. They came out of faster-than-light travel right behind us." Felt her old heart begin to beat faster. "How many?" 20 they are. The word hit like a physical blow. Everyone in this part of the galaxy knew that name. They were beings tall and covered in hard black armor that grew from their own bodies. They had sharp claws and many eyes, and they moved in swarms like the insects they resembled. But worse than their appearance was their nature. They were conquerors. They did not trade. They did not negotiate. They took what they wanted, and what they wanted most was slaves. "Change course," ordered. "Maximum speed." The helmsman tried, but the ship groaned and shuddered. They were a mining vessel, not a racing ship. They were slow and heavy with cargo. Before they could even begin to turn, the first shots hit their engines. The steady horizon shook violently. Crew members fell to the floor. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. Through the window could see the ships moving closer. They were sleek and dark, shaped like the predators they were. The largest one, a massive carrier, positioned itself directly above them. "Engines are gone," the helmsman reported. His voice was filled with despair. "We cannot move." Closed her eyes for a moment. 60 years of avoiding trouble, and now trouble had found her anyway. She thought of her crew, of her granddaughter Bora, who was hiding somewhere in the lower decks. They would all be taken. They would all become slaves, worked until they died in some mine far from home. "Unless," said quietly, "do you remember that frequency, the one the human traders gave us?" Looked up, "The emergency frequency. But Captain, we have never used it. We do not even know if humans will respond. They are so far away and we have only met them once." "I know," walked slowly to the communication station. "But we have no other choice. Send a message. Send it now." Hesitated for only a moment. Then she began working, her 4 hands moving across the console. She opened the frequency that the human traders had given them 3 years ago, during a brief meeting at a trading station. The humans had been strange and frightening, beings from a heavy world where everything was trying to kill them. They called themselves, though they used the term as a joke. The message was simple, did not have time for anything more. "We are dying, please help." She sent it into the darkness of space, aimed at the distant region where humans lived. Then she sat back and waited. On the carrier, boarding parties were already preparing. Soon they would cut through the steady horizon's hull and take everyone aboard, gathered her crew together in the main corridor. She told them to stay calm, to not resist, to survive however they could. But in her heart, she felt only despair. Far away at the edge of Terran space, a human destroyer called the Iron Promise was on patrol. It was a small ship by human standards, with a crew of 100 and enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Commander Du sat in his captain's chair, reviewing reports from the border stations. He was a tall man with short black hair and calm eyes that had seen many battles. His tactical officer, Lieutenant, stood nearby, studying the sensor readings. The communications officer suddenly straightened in his seat. "Commander, we have received an emergency signal on the old rescue frequency. It is from far out, past the border." Du turned his head. "What kind of signal?" "Text only, sir, very short." The officer read it aloud. "We are dying, please help." The bridge went quiet. Du stood up slowly and walked to the main display. He looked at the source of the signal, a small dot far beyond Terran territory. It was in space. "Lieutenant," he said, "how long to reach those coordinates at maximum speed?" Checked her calculations. 4 hours, sir. But Commander, that is deep in hostile territory. We would be going alone against unknown numbers. Du nodded. He understood the risks. But he also understood something else, something that was written into every human who wore this uniform. When someone called for help, you answered. It did not matter who they were. It did not matter how dangerous it was. You answered. "Contact the nearest," he ordered. "Tell Admiral Bin we have a rescue operation. Then set course for that signal maximum speed." The Iron Promise turned in the darkness and began to accelerate. Behind it, across the communication channels, the call went out to every human ship in range. Someone was dying. Someone needed help. They were coming. Overlord stood on the command deck of his carrier and watched the small mining ship with satisfaction. The Conquest of Prey was his finest vessel, armed with weapons that had destroyed dozens of ships and carrying soldiers that had conquered entire worlds. Today's hunt was almost too easy, but that did not bother him. Easy prey was still prey. They were born to conquer. It was in their blood, in their very nature. They came from a world of endless competition, where the strong survived and the weak became food. When they reached the stars, they brought this way of life with them. Other species existed only to serve thee or to die. Many eyes studied the ship below. Such fragile creatures, he thought. Their bones would break under the weight of proper work, and they would not last long in the deep mines. But they would last long enough to be useful, and when they died, there would always be more. "Boarding parties are ready, Overlord," his second-in-command reported. "Shall we begin?" "Yes, take them all alive if possible. Damaged goods sell for less." The boarding ships launched from the carrier's belly. They were small and fast, designed to cut through hull metal and deliver soldiers directly into enemy vessels. They had no weapons, no defenses, nothing that could stop what was coming. Allowed himself a moment of pleasure. This was how the universe worked. The strong took from the weak, and there was nothing the weak could do about it. On the steady horizon, Captain heard the terrible sound of metal being cut. They were coming through the hull in 3 places at once. She held young Bora close to her, the small child trembling with fear. Around them, the crew stood in silent terror, waiting for the end. "Grandmother," Bora whispered, "I am scared." "I know, little one," stroked the child's soft head. "I know." The doors burst open and they poured in. They were enormous, twice the height of any, with black armored bodies and claws that could cut through steel. They moved fast and grabbed crew members with brutal efficiency. Anyone who tried to run was knocked down. Anyone who cried out was silenced with a blow. Was dragged away with the others. She looked back with desperate eyes, but there was nothing the old captain could do. In minutes, most of the crew had been taken to the boarding ships and carried to the carrier. Herself was thrown into a corner, too old and weak to be worth the trouble of immediate capture. Bora somehow escaped notice, hidden behind a broken console. "We will come back for the rest," a soldier hissed. "Do not try to hide." Then they were gone and was alone with her granddaughter in the damaged ship. She was injured, her side bleeding from where a claw had struck her. But she was alive, and so was Bora. For now, that was enough. On the conquest of prey, Overlord received a report that made him pause. His sensor officer was showing him something strange. Ships approaching Overlord, 5 vessels coming fast from Terran space. Felt a flicker of annoyance. Humans. He had heard of them, of course. Everyone had heard of the strange, soft-skinned beings from a heavy-gravity world who had somehow become a minor power in this region of space. But he had never faced them in battle, and he did not think much of their reputation. "Only 5 ships," he made a clicking sound of amusement. "We have 20. They must be coming to negotiate. Open a communication channel." The screen flickered to life and found himself looking at a human face. It was a male, with dark hair and calm eyes that showed no fear. Behind him could see the bridge of a human warship, filled with other humans working at their stations. "Attention, vessel," the human said. His voice was quiet but clear. "This is Commander Du of the Terran destroyer Iron Promise. You have attacked a civilian vessel and taken prisoners. Release them immediately. You have 60 seconds." Stared at the screen in disbelief. Then he began to laugh. The sound was harsh and clicking, the version of amusement. His bridge crew joined in, filling the command deck with the noise of their mockery. 60 seconds, leaned forward, his many eyes gleaming. "Little human, do you not see that you are outnumbered 4-1? Do you not understand that we do not take orders from lesser species. We give them." The human's expression did not change. 50 seconds. Cut the communication with an angry gesture. "Prepare weapons. If these fools want to die, we will help them." The ships began to move into attack formation. 20 warships, each one bristling with guns and missiles. Against them, 5 small human vessels hung in space, looking fragile and alone. Felt certain of his victory. The humans were clearly insane, but their insanity would cost them their lives. 60 seconds passed. The darkness of space suddenly filled with light. 12 more ships appeared out of faster-than-light travel, dropping into position around the human destroyer. These were not small patrol vessels. These were warships, real warships, led by a massive battleship that dwarfed even the conquest of prey. Admiral Bin stood on the bridge of the Unbroken Will and looked at the fleet with cold eyes. She was a small woman with gray-streaked hair, but she had commanded more battles than most officers would see in a lifetime. When the call had come from Commander Du, she had not hesitated for a moment. "All ships," she said calmly. "Weapons free, destroy them." The human fleet opened fire. Had never seen anything like it. Human weapons burned through shields as if they were made of paper. His ships, so proud and powerful moments ago, began to explode one after another. The humans moved together like parts of a single creature, coordinating their attacks with impossible precision. Where they fought as individuals, each ship trying to find its own glory, the humans fought as one. "Return fire," screamed. "All ships concentrate on the battleship." But the weapons barely scratched the human shields. The Unbroken Will continued forward, ignoring the attacks as if they were nothing more than rain. Its massive guns turned toward the conquest of prey, and felt something he had never felt before in his life. Fear. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships fall back." Some of his ships tried to run. The humans did not let them. The smaller Terran vessels were faster than anything they had, and they chased down the fleeing ships one by one. In less than 10 minutes, the great fleet was reduced to burning wreckage. Only the conquest of prey remained, its engines crippled, its weapons destroyed. Watched through the smoke on his bridge as a human ship moved alongside his carrier. A boarding tube connected to his hull. "Overlord," his second-in-command said weakly, "what do we do?" Had no answer. For the first time in his life, he was the prey. On the Iron Promise, Commander Du watched the Marines prepare for boarding. These were Terran soldiers, trained for combat in the most hostile environments imaginable. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that could cut through shells like butter. "Remember," Du told them through the communication system, "there are prisoners on that ship, civilians. Find them and keep them safe." The Marines moved through the boarding tube and into the carrier. The battle inside was short and brutal. Warriors tried to fight, but they discovered something terrible. In close combat, humans were faster, stronger, and far more deadly than anything they had ever faced. Within an hour, the conquest of prey was secured. Overlord was bound and brought before Commander Du in chains. The prisoners, including Young, were freed from the cargo holds where they had been kept like animals. And in the ruined, steady horizon, Captain heard a gentle voice speaking through the emergency speakers. "Vessel, this is the Terran destroyer Iron Promise. We received your distress call. Medical teams are on the way. You are safe now." Held Bora close and allowed herself to cry for the first time in 60 years. The had answered. The inside of the conquest of prey smelled like smoke and fear. Sergeant led his Marine squad through the dark corridors, stepping over the bodies of warriors who had tried to stop them. His rifle was still warm from the battle, but his hands were steady. He had done this many times before. They were larger than humans and their armored shells looked impressive, but had learned long ago that size did not matter as much as training. They fought like individuals, each one trying to prove its own strength. Humans fought like a pack, covering each other, moving together, striking where the enemy was weakest. It was no contest. "Sergeant," one of his soldiers reported, "we found the cargo holds. There are life signs inside." Moved quickly to the location. The doors had been sealed from outside, locked with heavy bars meant to keep the prisoners trapped. He nodded to his team, and they cut through the locks in seconds. The doors opened, and saw something that made his chest tighten with anger. They were packed together like cargo, dozens of them crowded into a space meant for supplies. They were thin and frightened, their large eyes blinking in the sudden light. Some of them had been injured during the capture. Some of them were too weak to stand. They looked at the humans with expressions of pure terror. Understood. To them, humans were just another group of dangerous aliens. They had no way of knowing that they were safe now. He slowly lowered his rifle and removed his helmet, showing his face. Then he knelt down so that he was at the same height as the nearest, a young female with communication equipment still attached to her belt. "My name is," he said softly. "We came because you called for help. We are not going to hurt you. We are here to take you home." The young stared at him. This was the communications officer who had sent the desperate message into the darkness. She could not believe what she was seeing. The human's face was strange and flat, with only 2 eyes and smooth skin that looked soft and vulnerable. But his voice was gentle, and his eyes held no cruelty. "You came," she whispered. "You really came." "Of course we came," seemed confused by her surprise. "You asked for help." On the steady horizon, a different kind of rescue was happening. Medic moved through the damaged ship with her medical kit, searching for survivors. She was a small woman with kind eyes and quick hands, trained to heal rather than fight. Behind her came more medical staff, carrying equipment and supplies. They found Captain in the engine compartment, barely conscious and bleeding badly. Knelt beside her and began working immediately, her hands moving with practiced skill. "Stay with me, Captain," she said. "We are going to take care of you." His eyes fluttered open. She saw the human face above her, so different from her own people, yet somehow filled with warmth. "My crew," she managed to say. "My granddaughter." "Your crew is being rescued from the ship right now. And your granddaughter," looked around the dark compartment. "Hello, is there a child hiding in here? It is safe to come out now." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a small gray face appeared from behind a broken machine. Bora was trembling, her large eyes wet with tears, but she was alive and unhurt. "There you are," smiled and reached into her kit. She pulled out a small package of nutrient paste, the kind humans gave to their own children. "Are you hungry? This is sweet. I think you will like it." Bora hesitated. She had been taught to fear strangers, especially large alien strangers, but something about this human felt safe. Maybe it was her gentle voice. Maybe it was the way she smiled. Slowly, carefully, Bora crept forward and took the food from his hand. "Good girl," said. "Now stay close to me, okay? I am going to make your grandmother better." Captain watched this interaction through half-closed eyes. She had heard stories about humans, from their harsh planet of constant danger. The stories said they were violent and aggressive, built for combat and survival. And this was true, she had seen what they did to the... But the stories had not mentioned this other side of them. The gentle side, the protective side. On the conquest of prey, Overlord had been brought to the bridge to face his captors. He stood in chains before Commander Du, his many eyes filled with hatred. Around him, human soldiers watched with weapons ready, but they did not need to worry. Was defeated, and he knew it. "Why?" he demanded. "Why did you interfere? They are nothing to you. They are weak and worthless. Why would risk war for creatures like them?" Commander Du looked at the Overlord for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm and cold. "You attacked people who asked us for help. That is enough." "That is madness," struggled against his chains. "We are the Empire. We have conquered 100 worlds. Do you know what you have done? The Supreme Overlord will not accept this insult. He will bring the Grand Fleet. He will destroy your entire species." Du nodded slowly. "Then he is welcome to try." Admiral Bin received the transmission on the Unbroken, just as the last of the prisoners were being transferred to safety. It came from the Supreme Overlord himself. The message was full of threats and demands, rage and promises of revenge. The Empire would mobilize its entire military. They would make humanity pay for this humiliation. Bin listened to the message carefully. Then she opened a response channel. "This is Admiral Bin of the Terran Defense Force. You attacked civilians under our protection. You enslaved innocent people. You have one chance to prevent what comes next. Release all your slaves, all of them, every species you have ever taken. Do this, and we will consider peace." There was a pause. Then the voice came back, dripping with contempt. "You dare to give us orders. We are the masters of this region. We will crush you like the insects you are." Bin cut the communication. She turned to her navigation officer. "I want the coordinates of their capital world, and contact Terran Command. Tell them we are going to need the main fleet." In the medical bay of the Iron Promise, sat wrapped in a warm blanket, watching the human doctors treat her fellow. They were so careful, so gentle. They moved slowly so as not to frighten the patients. They spoke softly and explained everything they were doing. For creatures who could destroy a fleet in minutes, they showed remarkable kindness. A human soldier walked past and gathered her courage to speak. "Excuse me," she said. "May I ask you something?" The soldier stopped and turned. He was young, with a friendly face and curious eyes. "Of course. What do you need?" I want to understand," clutched her blanket. "You came so fast. We are strangers to you. We are far from your territory. Why did you come so quickly to save people you have never met?" The soldier looked at her with genuine confusion, as if she had asked why the stars were bright or why space was dark. The question seemed to make no sense to him. "You called for help," he said simply. "What else would we do?" Had no response. In her experience, in the experience of every who had ever lived, the strong did not help the weak. The powerful did not protect the powerless. That was not how the galaxy worked. But perhaps, she thought, that was not how humans worked either. Perhaps they played by different rules. 2 weeks passed. The rescued were taken to a Terran medical station, where human doctors worked day and night to heal their injuries. Captain recovered slowly, her old body fighting hard to survive. Bora stayed by her side, no longer afraid of the humans who brought them food and medicine. The galaxy held its breath. The Empire had never suffered such a defeat. For generations, they had conquered without resistance, taking whatever they wanted from whoever they wanted. Now, for the first time, someone had struck back, and that someone had won. Supreme Overlord was ancient by standards, his black shell from countless battles. He had ruled the Empire for over a century, and under his command, the had grown from a regional power to a force that made entire civilizations tremble. No one had ever him and lived. Until now. Stood before his war council and spoke in a voice like grinding metal. These humans think they have won a victory. They think they can embarrass us and escape punishment. They are wrong. We will gather every ship, every soldier, every weapon we possess. We will find their worlds and burn them to ash. We will take their people as slaves and work them until they beg for death. This is my command. The Grand Fleet began to mobilize. Over 200 warships gathered at the edge of space, the largest military force the Empire had ever assembled. News of this spread across the galaxy, and many species watched with fear. If they could destroy the humans, then no one was safe. Ambassador Wu arrived at the meeting point 3 days before the expected battle. He was a tall man with silver hair and calm, patient eyes. His job was to find peaceful solutions to violent problems, and he had done this work for 30 years. But as he looked at the massive fleet through his ship's windows, he knew that peace was unlikely. Still, he had to try. "Supreme Overlord," he said through the communication channel, "I am Ambassador Wu of the Terran Republic. I come with an offer of peace." His image appeared on the screen. He was larger than had been, older and more terrifying. His many eyes burned with hatred. "Peace?" The Overlord made a sound of disgust. "You speak of peace after you attacked our fleet, after you captured our Overlord. You are either very brave or very foolish." "Neither," Wu replied calmly. "I am practical. War between our peoples will be costly for both sides. There is a better way." "Tell me your terms, human. Make me laugh before I kill you." Wu did not react to the threat. "Release all species you have enslaved. End your expansion. Return to your original territory. If you do this, humanity will not seek revenge for your attack on the vessel. We will begin a new relationship based on trade and cooperation." The silence that followed seemed to last forever, then began to laugh. It was a terrible sound, harsh and clicking, filled with centuries of cruelty. "You dare to give orders to the Empire, we who have conquered 100 worlds, we who have crushed species that existed before your ancestors crawled from the mud," leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Here are my terms, little human. Surrender your fleet. Give us your worlds, become our slaves as so many have before you. Refuse, and every human in existence will suffer." Wu nodded slowly. He had expected this response, but protocol required him to try. "I understand. In that case, I have nothing more to say." He ended the communication and sent a single message to Admiral Bin. "Negotiation failed. They have chosen war." The Terran Defense Fleet arrived 1 hour later. These were not the patrol ships that had destroyed Force. These were the main battle fleet, the ships that humanity kept ready for true emergencies. Battleships and carriers, cruisers and dreadnoughts, all of them carrying weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand the fire of suns. Admiral Bin commanded them from the bridge of the Unbroken Will, with Commander Du and his Iron Promise flying at her side. Captain watched from the medical station through a viewing screen. She had insisted on seeing this, on witnessing what happened when went to war for real. Beside her and the other rescued gathered, too curious and too grateful to look away. "They are outnumbered," said quietly. "They have more ships." Shook her head. "Numbers mean nothing, watch." Supreme Overlord saw the human fleet and felt confident. Yes, the humans had better weapons and better shields, but the Grand Fleet had mass and numbers. 200 ships against less than 100. The math was simple. All ships forward, he commanded. Overwhelm them with our numbers, show them the power of The Grand Fleet charged. It was an impressive sight, hundreds of warships moving together like a swarm of angry insects. They opened fire as they came, filling space with missiles and energy beams. The humans did not charge back. Instead, they did something that confused the commanders. They waited. Admiral Bin watched the approaching fleet with calm eyes. She waited until they were committed to their attack, until they could not easily change direction or retreat. Then she gave her orders. All ships execute pattern Delta 7, target their formation centers, fire at will. What happened next would be studied by military commanders for centuries. The human fleet split into 5 groups, each one moving with perfect coordination. They did not try to fight the head-on. Instead, they curved around the edges of the enemy formation, striking at weak points and vulnerable ships. When they tried to turn to face them, the humans had already moved, hitting them from another direction. It was not a battle, it was a lesson. Ships exploded by the dozens. Their weapons could not track the fast-moving human vessels. Their shields could not stop the powerful Terran guns. Every time a group of ships tried to concentrate their fire on a single target, that target would vanish while 3 other human ships tore them apart. Screamed orders from his command deck, but nothing worked. His fleet was being dismantled piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Fall back, he finally ordered. All ships retreat to the... But the humans would not let them go. The Terran ships pursued, faster and deadlier, destroying the fleeing without mercy. Watched his grand fleet die around him, and for the first time in his long life, he understood what prey felt like. Commander Deuce Iron Promise led a group of destroyers directly at its flagship. The massive command ship tried to fight back, but its weapons were designed for slow-moving targets, not the dancing human vessels. Overlord, second-in-command, shouted, "Shields are failing, we must surrender." "Do not surrender," grabbed his officer and threw him aside. "We will fight to the last." The final strike came from the unbroken will itself. Admiral Bin watched the flagship on her screen and spoke a single word. "Fire." The battleship's main guns roared, and its command ship vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. The Supreme Overlord, who had ruled the Empire for a century, who had enslaved countless millions, was gone in an instant. The survivors of the Grand Fleet scattered and ran. They had come to destroy humanity. Instead, they had witnessed the death of their empire. On the medical station, Captain watched as the battle ended. Tears ran down her gray face, but they were not tears of sadness. "It is over," she whispered. "The Empire is finished." Stood beside her, eyes wide with wonder. "They did this for us, all of this because we called for help." Nodded slowly. "Remember this day, child. Remember what it means when answer your call." Admiral Bin surveyed the wreckage of the fleet. Already, she was receiving reports from her captains, damage assessments and casualty counts. The losses on the human side were light. The losses on the side were total. "Set course for space," she ordered. "It is time to free the slaves." The Terran fleet turned toward the enemy, and a new chapter in galactic history began. 3 months had passed since the fall of the Empire. The galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. Where once they had ruled through fear and violence, now there was only chaos and confusion. Their worlds were in turmoil, their leaders dead or captured, their military destroyed. But from this chaos, something new was being born. Human ships moved through former space, but they did not come as conquerors. They came as peacekeepers. Admiral Bin had made this clear from the very first day. Humanity had not fought this war to build an empire of their own. They had fought it to free the enslaved and to make sure they could never hurt anyone again. On 100 worlds, the slave camps were opened. Species that had been prisoners for generations walked free for the first time. Some of them did not even remember what freedom felt like. Some of them were born in chains and had never known anything else. But now, with human soldiers standing guard and human ships overhead, they could finally begin to heal. Captain stood on the bridge of a new ship. The steady horizon had been too damaged to repair, but the government had given her command of a replacement vessel. She was too old to retire now, she said. There was too much work to be done. Captain, her communications officer reported, "We are approaching the Galactic Council meeting point." Nodded, "Take us in." The council meeting was the largest gathering of species in galactic history. Representatives from over 50 civilizations had come together to discuss what would happen next. Some were old powers who had watched the war from a distance. Some were newly freed species who were still learning how to govern themselves. All of them were curious about the humans who had changed everything. Was invited to speak as a witness. She stood before the council, a small gray figure facing hundreds of alien faces, and told her story. "My ship was attacked by she began. "My crew was captured. My granddaughter and I were left to die. In desperation, my communications officer sent a message on a frequency we had never used to a species we barely knew. That message said only 5 words: 'We are dying. Please help.'" She paused and looked around the chamber. Every eye was on her. The humans could have ignored that message. We were far from their territory. We had nothing to offer them. We were strangers, weak and helpless. There was no logical reason for them to risk their lives for us. His voice grew stronger. "But they came anyway. They came fast and they came with fire. They destroyed the fleet that held us captive. They healed our wounded. They freed our people. And when the Empire threatened revenge, the humans did not back down. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They went to war for us." "Why?" someone in the crowd called out. "Why would they do this?" Smiled. It was a question she had asked herself many times over the past 3 months, and she finally understood the answer. Because that is who they are. Humans form bonds quickly, even with strangers. They feel responsible for those who need their help. They cannot walk away from suffering, even when walking away would be easier and safer. Some call this weakness. I call it strength. She turned to face the section where the human delegation sat. Commander Du was there, recently promoted and wearing a new uniform. Beside him sat Medic, Sergeant, and Admiral Bin herself. They looked uncomfortable with the attention, which somehow made them more impressive. "They are not monsters," said. "They are not conquerors, they are protectors, and if you are wise you will make them your friends." The council debated for many hours after speech. Some species wanted formal alliances with humanity. Others were cautious, still unsure if they could trust such a powerful and unpredictable race. A few were afraid that humanity would use its strength to dominate the galaxy, just as they had done. Commander Du addressed these fears directly when his turn came to speak. "Humanity does not want to rule the galaxy," he said simply. "We have enough trouble ruling ourselves. We did not fight them for territory or resources. We fought them because they were hurting people who asked for our help. That is all." "But what if we do not want your help?" a delegate asked. "What if we wish to be left alone?" Du nodded. "Then we will leave you alone. We do not force ourselves on anyone. But if you ever find yourself in trouble, if you ever need protection, send us a message. We will come." Had joined a new diplomatic mission, traveling between species as a translator and cultural advisor. She had learned much about humans in the past months, and she wanted to help others understand them too. The young who had once been too frightened to speak had become a bridge between worlds. Medic remained at a refugee processing center, helping displaced beings from a dozen different species rebuild their lives. She worked long hours, treating injuries and illnesses, providing food and shelter. When asked why she did not return to her comfortable life in Terran space, she gave a confused look and said, "These people need help. Why would I leave?" Young Bora had recovered fully from her ordeal. She spent her days on the new ship with her grandmother, drawing pictures and learning to read. Her favorite subjects to draw were human soldiers standing beside families. In her pictures, the humans were always smiling and they were always safe. The council meeting ended with a historic agreement. 16 species signed treaties of friendship with humanity. 30 more began negotiations for trade and mutual defense. Even those who refused to sign admitted that the galaxy had changed forever. Months later, Captain received a new distress call. It came from a distant system, from a species she had never met. Their message was desperate and afraid. Raiders were attacking their colony, and they had no way to defend themselves. Smiled and opened a communication channel to the human escort ship that now traveled beside her. "Commander 1," she said, "we have received a call for help." The response came immediately. "We heard it too, Captain, already setting course. Care to join us?" Looked at, who now served as her first officer. The young was smiling, her fear long since replaced by confidence and purpose. "Of course," replied. "That is what we do now, we answer calls." The two ships turned toward the distant system and accelerated. Behind them, the galaxy continued to change. Where there had been fear, there was now hope. Where there had been silence, there were now messages flying between worlds. And at the center of it all, the stood watch. They did not ask for thanks. They did not expect payment. They simply waited, ready to answer whenever someone called. Because that was what humans did. That was who they were. And the galaxy was finally beginning to understand. The message that had started it all, that desperate cry from a dying ship, had traveled across the darkness and found the one species that would not ignore it. The SOS had reached the. And they had answered.